The terminal was buzzing. Passengers scurried through gate C32, juggling coffee cups, carry-ons, and the last drops of patience. It was just another Tuesday flight to Chicago. Nothing out of the ordinary, until he walked in. He wore a simple navy polo. Khaki slacks. Leather shoes polished but worn. Nothing flashy. Nothing loud. Just a black man, early 40s, calm, composed. He carried a small black duffel and a folded newspaper under one arm. His name was Elijah Brooks. The woman behind the counter barely looked up when he handed over his boarding pass. But then her eyes flicked to the name. And something shifted. Her brows pinched. Her mouth tightened. "I'm sorry, sir," she said sharply, loud enough for the other passengers to hear. "There seems to be an issue with your seat assignment." Elijah blinked. "Issue? I booked first class. Seat 2A. She tapped furiously on the keyboard. "Yes. Well, you'll need to step aside." People turned. Watched. Whispered. Elijah held her gaze. Calm. Steady. "I'm sorry, but I don't see the issue." Another woman, a flight attendant, stepped in. Blonde bun. Tightly pulled. The kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the boarding line, sir," she said. "We'll get this sorted. Eventually." Elijah didn't move. "I have a confirmed seat. I arrived early. What exactly is the problem?" This time, the attendant didn't bother lowering her voice. "Sir, you're making the other passengers uncomfortable." That word. Uncomfortable. It landed like a slap. A mother nearby shifted her daughter behind her. A businessman rolled his eyes and mumbled, "Here we go again." Elijah's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Just took a breath. A long, measured breath. Behind him, an elderly white man who'd been watching stepped forward. "He was ahead of me in line." Showed his pass. "What's the hold-up?" The gate agent shot him a glance. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." But it did. It concerned everyone. Because the next moment, the attendant leaned in and muttered just loud enough for Elijah, and the nearest passengers, to hear. "This is a high-tier experience. We try to maintain a certain standard." Elijah blinked once. Slowly. "Excuse me? You might feel more comfortable in economy." The gate fell silent. Dead. Silent. Elijah looked at her. Then down at his ticket. Then back up. And finally, he said something that didn't sound calm at all. "You don't know who I am, do you?" The agent stiffened. The attendant tilted her head. "I'm not asking for special treatment," Elijah said, voice low but steady. "I paid for a seat. I'm taking that seat." But they weren't having it. Another agent appeared, summoned like backup. Bigger, sterner, louder. "We need to remove you from this flight, sir." "For what?" The man shrugged. "We reserve the right to deny service." That line? That tired old line. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. One started recording on their phone. Elijah looked around the gate. At the faces watching. Some sympathetic. Most just silent. And then he reached into his pocket. Just like that. The security tensed. The attendant gasped. But he didn't pull out anything dangerous. Just a simple, black leather wallet. He opened it. Pulled out a slim, laminated ID. Held it up. Not a driver's license. Not a frequent flyer card. But something far more important. And that's when the agent froze. The attendant's eyes widened. Because suddenly, the black man with attitude they were trying to kick off the plane was holding a shareholder pass. Gold-bordered. Embossed. And bearing the logo of the very airline they worked for. The boarding gate stayed quiet for a full 3 seconds. Then Elijah tucked the card away. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," he said softly. And this time, nobody told him to step aside. The supervisor showed up 5 minutes later. She wore a dark blazer, a laminated badge, and a smile that looked more forced than helpful. "Elijah Brooks?" she asked, glancing at a tablet in her hands. "I'm Cynthia, head of boarding operations. Let's see what's going on here." The blonde flight attendant stepped forward eagerly. "He was causing a disruption. Refused to comply. I thought it was best to involve security." Elijah didn't move. "I didn't refuse anything. I was told I was making passengers uncomfortable, and was denied my seat." Cynthia raised a brow. "Seat 2A, correct?" "Yes." She turned to the gate agent. "Was the boarding pass invalid?" The agent hesitated. "Well, no, but what?" Cynthia asked, voice sharper now. The agent opened her mouth. Closed it again. Cynthia looked back at Elijah. "Sir, may I see your ID again?" He pulled it out once more, calm, deliberate. She took it, studied it, and paused. Because it wasn't just a shareholder ID. It was founder level. One of only 7 in the company. Issued only to board executives, major stakeholders, or owners. Cynthia blinked twice. Looked back at Elijah. Then, the moment she spoke again, her tone had shifted. Completely. "Mr. Brooks, I apologize. I wasn't aware." He nodded, still calm. "I figured." But before the situation could resolve, the blonde attendant cut in. "I don't understand. If he's a shareholder or whatever, why didn't he just say that?" Elijah turned to her. His voice was flat. Controlled. "Because I shouldn't have to." She went quiet. So did the gate. Passengers nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Cynthia forced a smile again. "Let's get you on the flight. Right away." But Elijah shook his head. "No. No." He looked around. Pointed. "That young couple right there? They saw everything. That man in the blazer? He did too. The woman with the toddler?" She tried to speak up but was hushed. People straightened. Some looked away. Some didn't. Elijah's voice grew louder. "I'm not boarding that flight until we talk about what really happened here." The room tensed. Cynthia lowered her voice. "Mr. Brooks, we'd be happy to resolve this privately." "That's always the offer, isn't it?" Elijah cut in. "Sweep it under. Smooth it over." Quietly. Behind them, more phones came out. More recording. More attention. And then, from the intercom above, "Final boarding call for Flight 843 to Chicago. All remaining passengers, please proceed to Gate C32. The blonde attendant stepped in again, clearly flustered now. "We can't delay this flight." Elijah stared at her. "You had no problem delaying it when you thought I was just another black man trying to sneak into first class." The silence hit hard. Passengers shifted. And then a man, middle-aged, white, with silver hair and a veteran's cap, spoke up from the crowd. "He's not wrong." All heads turned. The man stepped forward. "I served 2 tours overseas. I know what discrimination looks like. And I know what courage looks like. What happened here today? That was ugly. And it happens too often." He looked at Elijah. Then at Cynthia. "I don't know who this man is, but I know he deserves better than what you gave him." Elijah nodded once. "Thank you." Cynthia looked pale. The gate agent beside her stared at the floor. The blonde attendant's smile was gone completely. Still, Elijah didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, holding their silence up like a mirror. Then, calmly, he asked, "What's your official policy on customer discrimination?" Cynthia swallowed. "Zero tolerance." "Then I suggest," he said, "you apply it. Today." She hesitated. "Are you requesting disciplinary action?" He stared at her. "I'm requesting accountability." And just like that, the temperature in Gate C32 dropped 10 degrees. Because everyone suddenly realized. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about power. About image. About a man who wasn't just another passenger. He was the kind of man who had the power to change things. And everyone knew it. The gate was frozen. Not by weather. By silence. By tension so thick, no one dared breathe too loudly. Elijah stood, steady as ever. But the others? They were spiraling. Cynthia stared at the laminated ID again, as if trying to make it vanish. The gate agent shifted on her feet, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. And the blonde flight attendant? She wasn't done. Not even close. She stepped forward, arms crossed, voice clipped with corporate pride. We have protocols. I followed them. If passengers become aggressive or refuse to comply. Elijah interrupted, voice like steel. I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't loud. I was black, with a first-class ticket. Gasps. Not from shock. From truth. The veteran in the cap nodded solemnly. A mother in a navy coat reached for her phone again. Somewhere behind them, a child whispered, Mom, what's going on? But the flight attendant didn't back down. Instead, she turned to Cynthia, grasping for power. We can't let this delay the flight. If he's upset, let corporate deal with it later. Cynthia hesitated. She knew what this was. Damage control. Bad optics. A moment away from going viral. But before she could speak, 2 TSA agents walked up. Summoned. Silent. Hands resting near holsters. One of them scanned the gate. Then locked eyes with Elijah. Sir? We need to have a word. A hush swept through the gate like wind through dry leaves. Elijah didn't move. About what? Just a conversation, the taller agent replied. Away from the boarding area. The gate agent perked up, clearly relieved. The flight attendant looked vindicated, chin raised. Cynthia didn't say a word. Elijah's jaw tightened. This was the play. Isolate him. Discredit him. Remove the problem, not the cause. He glanced at the passengers. At the veteran. The young couple. The mother with the toddler. They were watching. But they weren't stepping in. Not anymore. And Elijah knew it. He nodded slowly. All right. He picked up his duffel. Straightened his collar. And followed the agents down the hallway, away from the gate. Away from the cameras. As he disappeared around the corner, the attendant exhaled sharply. Finally. But the veteran shook his head. You don't get it, do you? She turned. Excuse me? That man? You just messed with the wrong person. Back in the hallway, the TSA agents walked in silence. Elijah said nothing either. Until they turned a corner and stopped in front of an unmarked security door. One of the agents scanned his badge. Elijah raised a brow. You sure this is necessary? The taller agent looked at him. Sir, we're not here to detain you. The second one added. We were instructed to bring you somewhere safe. And discreet. Elijah stared. Safe from who? The agent opened the door. Inside, a sleek conference room. Dim lights. 2 leather chairs. And a man in a tailored suit already waiting. He stood as Elijah walked in. Mr. Brooks, he said. So sorry about the welcome party. Elijah exhaled. Let me guess. Public relations? The man nodded. Senior Director. We were alerted about the situation 10 minutes ago. The board's watching. Live. Elijah didn't flinch. I assume you have a solution? The PR man hesitated. We can offer a private apology. A donation to a charity of your choice. And we'll ensure disciplinary reviews. Elijah raised a hand. No. The man blinked. No? Elijah sat. Crossed one leg. And said 7 words that turned the PR man pale. I'm calling an emergency shareholders meeting. Silence. The man stared. I'm invoking Executive Clause 4.6. Effective immediately. I want the CEO, legal counsel, and operations head on video in 20 minutes. But sir, this is unprecedented. Elijah leaned forward. So was today. And just like that, the balance shifted. Back at gate C-32, the blonde attendant smiled smugly as the doors began to close. The flight would take off. The noise would fade. Everything would go back to normal. Or so she thought. 20 minutes later, a screen flickered to life in the private conference room. 3 faces appeared. Grim. Composed. Corporate. The CEO. The company's general counsel. And the vice president of operations. They weren't smiling. Elijah, the CEO said, his voice tight. We received your emergency call. This situation has escalated quickly. Elijah didn't respond right away. He simply adjusted the nameplate in front of him. It read, Elijah D. Brooks, Executive Owner Class A, 22% stake. A pause. Then he spoke. I have a few questions before we proceed. The VP shifted in her chair. Of course. Elijah's eyes never left the camera. First, he said, I want to know what internal protocols define passenger discomfort, and how that definition allows gate staff to deny boarding to a paying customer with no incident. The general counsel cleared her throat. Well, that phrase typically refers to any situation where other passengers feel threatened based solely on perception, Elijah finished. Which, in this case, was based on race. Silence. I want names, Elijah said. The CEO glanced at someone off-screen. We have them. Good. Second, Elijah continued, voice firm. I want to know how a gate attendant and flight crew member felt emboldened enough to not only question a confirmed first-class ticket, but double down after seeing my ID. The VP opened her mouth, but said nothing. They looked at my name, my face, my skin, and decided I didn't belong. His voice didn't rise. But it cut deeper because it didn't. And when confronted with the truth, they didn't apologize. They escalated. They brought security. They tried to isolate me. He leaned forward. That tells me the culture here isn't broken. It's functioning exactly how it was allowed to. The CEO rubbed his temple. Elijah, this is regrettable. But we can manage it. Internally. No. Elijah's answer was instant. This will not be buried. I won't let that happen. You know why. He stood, walked to the window, and looked down at the tarmac, where Flight 843 was just beginning to taxi. Because this isn't the first time, he said. I've watched complaints roll in. Quiet settlements. Legal evasions. I stayed silent for too long. He turned back to the camera. But I'm not just a man with a ticket anymore. He slid a document across the table. Stamped. Signed. I'm enacting Article 7.2 of the Charter. The General Counsel's jaw dropped. That's a full policy override. The CEO froze. That gives you authority to remove personnel without board vote. Exactly, Elijah said. Back at Gate C-32, the plane was rolling. The flight attendant sat in her jump seat, smug and satisfied. The gate agent was preparing her next check-in. And Cynthia? She was staring at her tablet, watching passenger feedback pour in. Hundreds of messages, screenshots, even a trending hashtag not just a passenger. Then her device pinged. An alert. Mandatory operations update. Priority override. She opened it. And read 5 words that made her blood run cold. Effective immediately, personnel termination order. Names followed. 3 of them. Gate agent. Flight attendant. Supervisor. Her own name was listed last. The words beneath. Violation of executive policy. Reassignment pending review. Cynthia slumped into her chair. On the plane, the intercom crackled. The pilot's voice came over, calm but confused. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just received a message from corporate. We've been ordered to return to the gate. Please remain seated. The passengers murmured. Confused. Unsettled. And the flight attendant? She stood up, wobbling slightly, gripping the overhead bins. What? Why are we turning back? No one answered her. Not yet. But moments later, the door opened. And Elijah stepped in. Not as a passenger. Not as a victim. but as the man who had just flipped the entire airline system upside down. The plane door opened like a curtain rising on the final act. Every head turned. Passengers craned their necks. The hum of the engines faded beneath a heavier silence. And then they saw him. Elijah Brooks. Walking down the jet bridge. Not rushed. Not escorted. Just walking. Calm. Powerful. Like he belonged there all along. The blonde flight attendant blinked hard, her mouth parted in disbelief. Wait, what is he doing back on? Before she could finish, the pilot stepped into the cabin, clipboard in hand. Eyes locked on her. Ms. Haynes, he said quietly. I've just been informed this flight cannot proceed under current staffing. You're being removed. Effective immediately. Her face went pale. What? On what grounds? I followed protocol. No, Elijah said, his voice calm but absolute. You followed prejudice. And now, you'll follow the consequences. The co-pilot approached her gently. We need you to gather your things. She looked around for support. But no one came. Not the crew. Not the passengers. Not even the gate staff watching through the small window. She stormed off the plane. No dramatic exit. No final word. Just gone. When she passed Elijah, she looked up at him. He didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Just held her gaze for a beat too long. Long enough to say everything without saying a word. Back in the terminal, the gate agent stood with her bag in hand. A security escort waited quietly behind her. Cynthia was already in conversation with HR. Her eyes red. Her voice low. The dominoes had fallen. And not behind closed doors. Out in the open. Where the world could see. Elijah turned to the passengers now reboarding. Some gave him a respectful nod. Others said nothing, but held his gaze with quiet gratitude. And the veteran from earlier? He offered a firm handshake. You didn't just speak for yourself, the man said. You spoke for all of us who've been told to sit down and shut up. Elijah smiled faintly. Not anymore. The plane finally took off, 38 minutes late. But somehow, it felt right on time. 3 days later, the airline held a press conference. A new diversity initiative was announced. Real reforms. Not window dressing. The CEO stood behind the podium, but it was Elijah who spoke. He didn't yell. Didn't rage. He told the story as it happened. As it felt. And when he reached the part where he pulled out his ID and the gate froze, he paused. Then looked up at the cameras. At that moment, he said, I realized something. People see a black man in first class and assume it's a mistake. But no one assumes that about pain. Or humiliation. Or dignity. He placed his hands on the podium. No one should have to prove they belong where they already are. Silence. The powerful kind. The kind that stays with you. And then he ended with this. You can take someone's seat. You can try to take their voice. But never forget, sometimes, the person you're trying to silence owns the whole damn airline. The room erupted. Not in noise. In truth. In justice.